I think
My computer just told me in a female Terminator voice, recording in progress.
Skynet's active.
um,
So do you still have that list that I sent you, like the lessons learned, all that other stuff?
yeah, you just sent me those three questions, right? Those three
Yeah, yeah,
things.
yeah, yeah.
Actually, I took my time at work and I jotted them out and I wrote out some stuff for them. And,
Fantastic. So I want to get started with the most significant question to ask yourself after the military. But really, it's more like right before you leave and like that transitional period of going from military personnel to civilian. So that kind of time frame, like a little bit before and then during and a little bit after. So I'd like to get your thoughts on that particular topic. Like,
well,
what do you think?
so ours, coming out of the Marine Corps was the TRS program, which is like a 2 week long process of them just introducing outreach programs and introducing different ways that you could improve your brand, including your application, your resume, your interview practice, pretty much warming you up to the idea and getting used to the fact that you're no longer talking to military personnel.
Mhm.
But I went through that twice because around the time that I was doing it the first time, I was waiting for my reenlistment package to be approved and with no guarantee. So I went through the whole thing, and from my first one to my second one, all of that information, some of it remained the same, but practically all of it had changed.
Mhm.
You know,
You
so
know,
it
you're
was
supposed
very
to go through it multiple times, right?
uh no, I
Yeah,
didn't know that.
you're supposed to do it a year out, 6 months out, and then a few weeks before transition. You're supposed to do it multiple times, but you know how it goes, man. Like, it doesn't. Not only does it not always happen, it almost never happens. I
That's
mean,
actually
I've
good.
known of cases
Yeah,
personally where
help
folks
you.
never got to go through it. Somebody just had to like fake the funk and say, yeah, 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 totally fine, fuck out.
Well, that was pretty much it. I know some guys automatically fell back on the idea that, oh well, my granddad or my uncle owns this business. I'm just going to get a job with him, and then
Mhm.
I'll figure it out from there.
Yeah.
But in some cases, I mean, I never really heard about that. I did hear about that. You got to do it a year, 6 months, so on out.
Right.
But in many of those cases, especially since I was in a Victor unit at the time, it's like staff sergeant. Do you mind if I go do something that's going to benefit my civilian future?
Absolutely
And
not.
it's like what?
Yes. How
So
dare you?
yeah, it's like no, go police consulting. So just shit like that. But yeah, the one looking back on it, the one question that I had as soon as I completed it, realizing what I was going to have to get into was, what the hell do I do now?
What do I do now?
I mean, especially since I was a New York East Coast boy, upstate New York, no less.
right.
That was doing my first active duty assignment on the West Coast, California.
Yep.
So completely different sides of the world there, and I didn't know really what I could apply with the skills that I did in California in the civilian world right out of it.
Yep.
The first obvious idea was to go into law enforcement,
Hmm.
since that seemed the most applicable um, application of my trade,
Yeah.
coming from an infantry background. So I went from infantry. I thought it would transition into law enforcement pretty easy. Now, in hindsight, I'm like, yeah, not at all, not at all.
No.
So my second time around, um, same question, only I had a better grasp of what I was in store for.
Hmm.
Because at that time, I wasn't as closed off to the civilian world. You and I, having coming from that same background, um, we were more exposed to civilians and we were more exposed to opportunities because
Yeah.
we had less constriction on our time and we had less. Um, well, we were babysat a lot less.
You were actually able to grow up a little bit and adult a little bit. Well, we were also put into positions where we didn't have a choice. It was very different than your normal standard um, military duty assignment where you're very closed off from the rest of the world. until you're thrust onto it with a rifle and you're forced to do, whatever your job is, right? But being ambassadors of the Marine Corps to civilians in the civilian world definitely changed our ability not just to communicate with them, but to understand them also and build that kind of rapport with people who didn't necessarily have the same background as us, which a lot of folks from the military in general don't get to do until they're asking for somebody for a job.
And then they realize, crap, I don't know a whole lot of this.
Well, we're speaking two different languages, so it's
But that's just the other part too. In the military, you are in a organization that's been um, rooted in tradition and rooted in the way that it conducts and carries itself since its founding.
Mhm.
And it adjusts and it evolves, but it does so not at a fast rate.
you
It takes a lot to make a little bit of waves that affects the entire, in this case, Marine Corps wide. It's probably the same with any other military branch. Matter of fact, I know it's the same for any other military branch. Meanwhile, the civilian rate of change and evolution is very fast
yes,
because everybody who's anybody practically knows each other. And what's worse, or not worse, but what's more is that since social media has only evolved with that too, the ways of reaching out and the ways of all of these big names communicating, and then the just under and the whole pyramid of names after that, they all reach out and they all get to know these things and they improve upon each other. How
yeah.
did this person become as successful as he is? Well, I'm going to try that method. Maybe he can write me out a playbook. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't.
Well, a lot of it is, and the more I'm in the civilian world, the more I see it, is the idea that we had while we were service members of a meritocracy basically don't exist, right? So the first step is who you know, which gets your foot in the door. Everything after that is what you build. Then your merit is able to be put on display. But if you don't know anybody, you could be the most capable person on the planet and never get a chance. Um, I would say for myself, the question that I should have asked myself before I got out and during the transition process and then after would be, who am I relative to where I'm at, and who am I relative to the people I'm around. So what I noticed with myself, and then I, retrospectively noticed it with folks that I talked to, folks that we knew from those communities, is a massive loss in identity. Well, if you think about it, right, and people make jokes about it all the time, and everyone kind of laughs as they take a sip of their beer or whatever, that all the other branches are part of the DoD, but the Marine Corps is a cult, right? And that has to do right. See, exactly. um, but a lot of that has to do with the indoctrination process that we go through. And if you were like me, in a civil, I was a terrible civilian, right? I was just constantly in trouble. Had a lot of energy, didn't know what to do with it. Had a lot of smarts and used it all for evil, kind of thing. And I needed something. I needed the Marine Corps, and it came through. So I was one of those dudes that bought it all, hook, line, and sinker. And when you fast forward a decade of this is your all day, every day, that's your identity. Who are you? I'm a Marine. These are the things that I've done in it. Here's who I am relative to the organization. Here's who I am relative to all these people. Okay, well, at some point that stops. For me, it stopped 10 years in. And then I'm like, okay, well, I'm not that same dude and I'm not in that organization anymore. I mean, yes, to an extent, um, it's always going to be tattooed on my soul somewhere, right? It's never going to go away because it's a large chunk of life, right? A decade. Um, but you go through a huge identity crisis because who am I now? What is my purpose now? And those two things I believe are inextricably linked. Who am I? What is my purpose? Um, Going into the civilian world, I was lucky enough uh, to shift my focus relatively quickly. But there was also a massive culture shock that I was not ready for. Well, I went from
Yeah.
active duty Marine Corps to like engineering student. So I was thrust upon like, a civilian populace that was basically like running around chasing its tail, hoping to God to get some kind of degree to make money with. And I had a very different view on life than they did. So it took me quite some time to find my groove and kind of rehash my purpose, because I felt very, very lost around all these people who were also lost for different reasons. Um, in some ways, we were quite similar in that a lot of these kids have never been away from home before, and they're just, they get, 20 pinned to their shirt, swift kick on the ass out the door, go make friends and get a degree, and we'll see how it goes from there. But I'm going through an entirely different set of scenarios where, I've got a little bit of life on me, but at the same time, this is all brand new. I'm lost in the fact that I just, basically stopped an entire life and then immediately started a new one.
Another
So
one.
I wish
Yeah.
I'd have set. Go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing with you. You got to pick up another one.
Yeah, I wish I'd have sat there and thought about what the death of that life and the birth of this new life, what that would mean for me mentally, physically, emotionally, uh, having to start over as somebody else, because that was a super tough transitional period, uh, that I wish anybody would have at least talked to me about prior to the event. I think that would have made the transitional process infinitely easier. And like you mentioned before, we had the TRS program. That was crap.
Very much crap. Yes.
They
I got, I
miss
got, I got some supporting facts when it comes to the other questions about what the TRS failed to make me aware of. When
everything.
to,
Hey,
to,
guys, just so you know, there's a whole other world out there. Best of luck. There you go.
to support what you were saying before about the whole uh, identity crisis thing, um, there's a few other questions that I found that I asked myself once I got out. Now I got lucky enough. I tried to actually get back in the military, only I tried to get into the army right
Yeah.
afterward. But that didn't happen for an entire year.
Mm-hmm.
And during that year, I was just taking whatever cheap, lousy work that I could find
Mm-hmm.
that did not exercise my skill whatsoever. But it still revolved around um, some civilian exposure,
Right.
but not to the point where it was something that was going to make my career or break it.
Yeah.
And then I was able to go into the reserves, but by that time, um, I had realized, you know what, same thing that like this civilian world, it's a hell of a shift, it's a hell of an exposure. One of the things I did, especially when I did get into the reserves, was that I had to lower the hell out of my standards.
Yes. Yes.
And it was that too was a massive. You want to talk about two massive culture shocks? First, it was active military civilian world, then active military reserve military. And
Yeah,
I'm
I feel
like,
that.
I don't know where I can hang in here. But when I when I was trying to figure out what it is that I like, especially in hindsight, damn you hindsight. But it's one of those it's one of those things where it's like the MOS that I had before. Clearly, I'm having difficulty trying to transition it into something useful outside of the military. Is there a MOS that I should have pursued like more actively when I was in there, or
Yeah.
it goes along with the whole whatever that MOS was? Should I have stayed in longer to try to get it? And I find myself doing that today when people are
Yeah.
talking about like, you know, um, oh, my son or this person, or hey, I'm thinking about joining the military. What do you have any advice? And my first thing is I just grab them by the head and I'm like, pick something that you can do in the civilian world.
Yes.
And then I immediately ask them, what is it that you want to do? And one guy said, like, I want to go infantry. And this started happening. And I'm
Just
like, no,
let,
don't
let,
do
let me smack your brain a little bit to fix you, son.
that. What up? It's like, no. It's like, no, that. I told them, and I break it down for them, especially like the parents that are asking on behalf of their kid. It's like, make
Yeah.
sure they have like three options of things that they want to do or things that they can enjoy and they can learn. And they'll get all the certificates. They'll get 4 years of education, maybe even more. And that's already something that can load up into the civilian world. I
Yeah.
mean, my brother right now is still in, and he's a logistics officer.
Hmm.
Now, if he gets out and he gets maybe a clearance attached to his name,
Yeah.
he'll be set.
100%.
He'll be set. So he's got something going for him. But most guys have, along with the culture shock, they don't have a skill that is um, replicable to whatever's outside,
No,
and
they
that's
really
quite
don't.
stressful. That's quite stressful. Now you want to talk about another issue is where am I going to find that feeling? Or another question, where am I going to find that again? Is like, and I have
What feeling are you talking about exactly?
mostly camaraderie
So
or
your
that sense,
tribe.
yeah, or that sense of purpose.
I think so. That's tough. That's tough, right? Because I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive. I really don't. This is why I think. This is why I think that. So, do you remember? I think it was our first AFSAM, that Armed Forces Skillet Arms meet, that very first one that we did. Where like we were just around our people, and and by that I mean like everyone is like-minded, everybody's on the same page, everybody has similar experiences, everybody is moving toward a common goal. Granted, it's for like a super finite amount of time. I mean, it's like what is it, like 3 weeks or something,
I think, two
like two
weeks.
weeks, right? But in that 2 weeks, everyone has the same purpose, everybody has similar experiences, and it it feels like your tribe. You have like an amazing level of comfortability. Like even the parts of yourself that you don't necessarily show on a daily basis, those things come up and out, and everyone's got these big personalities, and you really get to put yourself on display because you're super comfortable, and it doesn't even matter if you do good or bad, right? But everyone's there lifting each other up, not just themselves, but they're lifting each other up, and it's like the perfect situation, the ideal situation for people to be in their purpose and to have their tribe at the same time. I've never felt anything like that um, for that long since.
Yeah, there's always been a split somewhere
Right.
between that.
Either I'm
Or
on my purpose or I'm with people that I can be me with, but it's never been like those two things
one collab.
really together. Yeah.
The only time that I've since all that, the only time that I have felt that is whenever I go to some military course on orders. That's
Yeah.
the closest I get to it. And but like you said, it's you know finite as far as the timing goes. It doesn't last forever. And some of the, to be quite honest, you say that some of these bonds that you're creating are going to last for a while, but they're not.
Yeah.
You might just like hear about each other. But again, the military is small. I didn't expect to run into some people that I have run into, and we try to, you know, rekindle some of those like inside jokes and talk about it a little bit. One guy, matter of fact, I know he's a guy in another state, and I was able to buy a firearm off of him. So he and I keep talking. We have that mutual acquaintance that will keep us linked for a little bit. But another thing, well, that's a realization for probably later on in this conversation. But one of the things that I've noticed, especially that helps me, and I don't know if you've noticed it too, but a lot of guys or a lot of people coming out of the military, they lack in that camaraderie and they have lost themselves in the meantime, and
Yeah.
they have no idea where to find it. I mean, they could try their VFW, but for the most part, you're running into a whole lot of older vets that you have something to talk about, but you don't have a whole lot to talk about, and you
No.
can't like reach that same equal level of understanding, you know. But most of that has to do with age. Most of that has to do with the different generations of the military. And one of the things I found going into the reserves was I get that little bit of a fix because guys
Yeah.
miss that mentality, they miss the camaraderie, they miss the purpose, and the everyone kind of working towards the same goal and the organization of it. And yes, even sometimes you miss the whole hurry up and wait because you've been part of it. It's like I'm where I belong with this
Normalcy
stupidity.
again. Yes.
Yes. But, so yeah, some people I've discovered that like that has helped me a great deal. Where I'm still getting that bit of a fix, and I've never felt wanting for it because I'll get it on occasion and
Yeah.
in stride so that it won't drive me crazy.
Well, one of the things that I don't think is healthy, and you mentioned the VFW, not to take anything away from those guys, not to detract from people, reestablishing themselves with a group that they can identify with. But I think a lot of people, a lot of vets, they look back too much.
Yeah,
Oh, I
yeah,
miss I miss this, I miss that, and I do too. I miss that common sense of purpose, that community that you have all the time, where if you're feeling like shit, you can go two doors down, knock on somebody's door, and just say, "Hey, man, I'm feeling fucking low. Like, do you want to just hang out for a little bit?" And 9 out of 10 times, they're gonna say, "Yeah, bro, come on in. We'll pop a beer and we'll sit here and talk about it until the fucking sun comes up, and we'll go grab some PT real quick." Like that, you don't have that as available, right? You don't have that same scenario um, out here in the civilian world, and a lot of times, like we go our own separate ways to a massive extent. I mean, you and I are talking on different sides of the country right now. I mean, yeah, like granted, technology is fantastic in that it makes people accessible, but it's not the same as sharing the same space with somebody and really talking about some shit. Uh, it's very, very different. And I think a lot of people don't get the same benefit from that like synthetic connection. It feels removed. It's the same premise to an extent. I don't know if you read the book On Killing, right?
I've read a great deal of it. I didn't
Okay.
finish it yet.
So
Unfortunately, just like the audio version, that can be a very dry book. But
it's
when it gets wet, it gets wet.
it's very, very dry. Oh God, it was hard to get through. But there were some fantastic nuggets. There were some fantastic nuggets, and what I'm referring to is the intimacy involved in killing and the levels of it, right?
I refer to that all the time. Actually, when I'm talking to people about some stuff.
So obviously, the most intimate you can be is like hands-on, like you were sharing the same breath space as somebody that you're struggling with, fighting with, whatever, and then um, the more distance you have away from that individual, whether it's like a scoped rifle or you're calling it an airstrike or whatever, you're removed from it. Not that you don't hold any responsibility for what happens, but it's less intimate. You have less of a connection with that individual. I think this is the same thing where it's lacking that personal intimacy when you're talking to someone, even if it's like a video chat, telephone, text, whatever, you're communicating. But because you're not sharing the same space, it's not the same level of intimacy. You don't feel that human connection. I think that's lacking. I was talking to one of the guys that I think he was still there. Well, I'll let you know his name later. Um, he was at Weapons Training Battalion with us, and he's going through it, man. Uh, and a lot of it is the same thing. He has everything he could have asked for. He's got the old lady, he's got the kids, got the house, got the job, got the cars, but is just completely empty. And
We got 10 minutes left on this meeting.
yeah, no, I just noticed that. I'm trying to upgrade.
but it's still that something missing.
Yeah. Um, if it kicks us out of here, we'll just start another chapter. Um,
Next question.
definitely something missing. Um, and he's seeing a therapist, but the problem that he's running into is that the therapist doesn't even understand what he's going through. So, so he might as well be talking to a brick wall. And I'm like, look, man, there's some stuff that you haven't let go of from from your time while you were in, uh, and you haven't accepted the fact that you're not in anymore. It seems like a dream you can't let go of. That you're constantly trying to live it again and again and again, and you can't do that, dude. Like you're just beating yourself to death, wanting to go back and live a part of your life that's done now.
But that's the hardest part too. Back when we were younger and back when, we have less care in the world, especially when you're active duty, so much of the stuff that you need to pay attention to, you don't have to pay attention to because it's handled for the most part
Somebody
outside of
else
your
is, yeah.
somebody else is handling it, which leaves you to be able to focus on the job, focus on you, focus on other things, right? But when as soon as you get out, all of a sudden you got a toilet roll list of a lot of other stuff you need to consider. You didn't have to necessarily worry about water bill if you were living in a barracks, for
Yep.
example, like we were, water bills, electric bills, rent, mortgage, things like that.
Yep.
Obviously, situations vary and there's always exceptions, but you got a lot more to worry about once you get out and you feel overwhelmed. And that in itself can be a little rough. But you're also having to, there's something I read in a different book. What was it? I think it was The Forgotten Warrior. It was somebody's tale of how he left Marsoc, and
Yeah.
he even referred to the Death Star, Stone Bay, all of it. But a lot of what he said ended with the hard truth is once you're out of the group, you're out of the group.
Yes.
The group will keep moving forward, and you have been left behind.
Hmm.
It's not as like there's no great ceremony. There might be a little party of congratulations, sell out, or
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
fair winds and but
Fair winds and following seas, my man.
I couldn't figure that one out. But yeah, but they send you on your way, and after that, they got to go to work the next day,
Yes.
and you made the choice to leave for whatever the reasons are, or you had no choice in some cases, and even if you try to reach out to those guys, or even if you stop by and say hi to the same office, you feel a disconnection because it's not your boys, it's not your bosses, it's not your office anymore. It's not. I mean, hell, dude, what would happen if we went on to range 4 right now? That was my range that I was managing for a little bit, and I kind of want to go down and see what kind of debaucheries happened in there. Just the whole thing. I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, it ain't gonna be mine anymore. It's gonna
No.
be different. And
Everything about that place is different. I mean, I got to run into a few dudes. Hell, one of the dudes that's working with me right now is like 2 generations removed from me, right? And it's just wildly different. Their mindset's different. The way they view what we did is completely different. Man, we were the last ones, um, or one of the last that got to live the way that our predecessors did for the most part. Yeah, the guns were new, the gear was new, but like the mentality was old. And there was like a reverence and a mystique about uh, how you conducted yourself. Everything was very, ritualistic in nature. Um, that doesn't exist anymore for the most part, from what I've been told. And you can say what you want, but um, I'm not sure I want to go see it. I'm not sure I want to lose that thought in my mind of how everything was going when I left it, because I mean you knew for the longest time that they were trying to change everything and make it super duper high speed and sexy and all John Wick and shit. Um, and I think they lost a lot of
resistance.
yeah they lost a lot of the intangibles along the way,
So,
but
like,
you can't.
might have been
Selling
some of that.
intangibles is fucking hard.
Yeah, yeah, it is. I mean, so you got that image in your head of what it was,
Yeah,
and you were there, and you were living that life, and you think that heading there now, seeing what it has become, under the assumption that it has degraded or fallen beneath the standards that you were surrounded by and
yeah,
the lifestyle you were surrounded by, that image in your head would just crash, and it could have negative effects.
yes,
That makes sense. Yeah, I get it. I mean, hell, dude, I, I, having not used some of the routes, or having, for example, having not been home for a long time, right?
yeah,
You come home and you see that new buildings have been raised, clearings have been made in areas that were highly wooded, in my case before, and so many things have changed. It's like, this is not necessarily the home that you swung from, or in this case, the range that we fired on.
yeah.
My internet connection is unstable. Yeah, I am hardwired, sir. You keep your mouth
How,
shut.
how dare you?
Sorry. But yeah, I get that too. You don't want to taint those things, because honestly, in most cases, they were good memories. And even if they weren't memories, they were memories that you can keep, that you can always refer to in the development of who you are today. So,
Absolutely. A lot of people look at those, look at memories in general, like good and bad. They focus on the bad, and they're like, oh, these things did, the bad things to me, and they can't let them go. And I get it because some of that stuff is seared in there. It's just not going to go away. But the good and the bad make you who you are. Um, I think that finding a way to help other people because of your pain is probably the best way to get past a lot of that stuff, as opposed to just sitting there and stewing in it. um, do something with it. Make it mean something.
you should probably hang up this call in a minute and 30 seconds we have left. Pick it up
Yeah,
after.
we'll pick it back up.
Right. See you in two.
Are you good on that one? You ready to move on to another one, or what do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, we can move on.
Okay. How about lessons learned since you were in the military?
It's, I was in the military.
Yeah. Just so happens. Got a whole damn list. Um, so let's just, the big ones, big lessons learned.
Hmm. One of the biggest ones, I really had to sift through some of this because a lot of it kind of blends together. And I thought they would be kind of classified individually as individual lessons, but really all of it is kind of accumulative or falls under the same umbrella. Um, One of them, though, is definitely forgiveness is better than permission. In
Yes.
in the sense that and I ran this past someone else who was in the military, and he's like, they might take that the wrong way. And I'm like, true, because how many times have you misbehaved? Because forgiveness is better than permission. But in especially in the sense of the military, I unfortunately, coming from a very a solid, loving family and a sheltered childhood,
Mhm.
um, I bought into the whole, if I misstep or if I go against orders or go against my leadership, then they could, you know, hijack my career and kick me out. And that made me toe the line
Yeah.
very, very gingerly for a
Yes.
while. Um, and that was on my first enlistment.
Mhm.
Second enlistment was a little bit different. And ever since then, it's like, uh, no, I I welcome the opportunity to say no to leadership now. Depending on the rank, I say it with more tact, or that really decides the tact
Yeah.
that I use. But too many times, um, myself and others that I know would try to either take initiative on something,
Mhm.
or they would try to make suggestions about how something should be done. And I know it happens where leadership will simply say, "Hey, how about you just, you know, shut your mouth?" Or how about you just go do what I told you to do? Or my favorite, how about you just stay in your lane? And when, that was the permission that you were waiting for because you want to do right, you want to shine, you want to advance by doing what's right.
Yep.
Instead, it's one of those things where there's no harm if you just go and do it.
It's actually less harmful to you 9 out of 10 times if you just did it as opposed to either waiting for permission or waiting for that that recognition prior to the event. I think that's what a lot of it is when you're young is you want that pre-recognition of like, hey, that's a really good idea. You should go do that. Da, 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 da. But if you knew it was a good idea, just go do it.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing too. Like in a lot of cases, if you want to advance, and this is unfortunate, but just like in the civilian world, in the military, there's the good old boy club.
Mm-hmm.
And the easiest way to get into the good old boy club is earn the favor and the appreciation of your direct line leadership.
Yeah.
That isn't going to happen a good 7 out of 10 times. But also, there are exceptions. And
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's really just leadership depending.
I have found that in the civilian world, they appreciate it way more than they did in the military. Hey, that was a great idea. I'm glad you did that. Keep up the good work, kiddo.
Mm-hmm.
That's the vast majority of what I find because all they're concerned with is the bottom line.
Yeah.
Very rarely, or at least it's been my experience that rarely um, people get upset that you did a thing. Mainly because I think in the military, uh, folks are concerned with clout a lot. How do your actions make me look? Was that my idea or not? If it wasn't my idea, I don't want you to do anything because it doesn't make me look good. It actually makes you look good. It makes me look like an asshole. Well, why wasn't that your suggestion there, Big Sarge? My guy was just doing what he thought was right. Like, um,
That's such a low standard too,
it
right
is.
there. Because
Yeah.
if you're subordinate, like you are by the book, say you're a leader, right?
Yeah.
And by the book, you are mentoring, coaching, and you're managing all of your guys to the same level, right?
Yep.
And all of these things that you're bestowing upon them, we're trying to um, have them do in accordance to the standards and the principles of the military.
Mm-hmm.
You are expressing it to them. You're the example. You want them to do it, and they go off and they do something totally jacked up, like almost criminal, even. And somehow it
Sometimes
comes
it
back
is.
to you as a leader. Sometimes it comes back to you as a leader, and you get the whole, "Hey, what's wrong with your guy?" Now, part of you is just like, he's his own person. Why don't you go ask him? But that's not
I
the
actually said
military.
that one time. Yes.
Yeah.
I had a phone call like 3 o'clock in the morning. Why did Lance Corporal Schmuckatelli do this? I don't know. I'm literally 150 miles away sleeping. You know more about what's going on than I do. Why don't you tell me?
But that's the double standard. You
Yeah.
as a leader get blamed for everything that your subordinates do wrong because somehow you're supposed to keep such tight tabs on them as if, and my friend just had a baby, so you know literally everything that little bag of meatloaf is doing the whole
Yeah.
time.
Yes.
Yeah,
At all
right.
times.
It's like he just rolled. Needs
Just so you know, just so you're
to
aware.
be broken. It's like
Yes.
all that. But when they do something great, right? And this is where like you see it in some leadership cases or in some chain of command cases. Hey, I think it reflects upon you as a leader that this person did that. And I'd say, therefore, you're doing a good job. But at the same time, like you said, hey, why didn't you come up with that idea? It was like, well, maybe it's because I gave him the feeling that it's okay for him to do that. And he doesn't
Yep.
need my permission to do it. That is a demonstration of a future leader right there. He's coming
Yes.
up and he's doing something. So
Yes.
cool. Good on him. Now what's next? How can I help him become that next step leader? All right, cool. Clearly he can handle a small working party cutting grass. Sweet. What's next? Let's see how he does with supply or some shit like that, you know?
Right. That's
It's
how leadership and development is supposed to work. You give your folks latitude in order to do stuff, and let them fail. Little fails, right? Um, so that they learn. And then when they do have those little failures, you don't completely crush them for it. Say, all right, what could you have done better in that scenario? Or did you understand what went wrong? What was incorrect? You work through that learning process, um, instead of just crushing your people every chance you get for whatever reason. I've smacked my face off the desk so many times trying to figure it out, and I'm still not there. Um, I yeah, I think that folks just doing what they think is right is the way to move forward. I view myself as a success, my leadership style and abilities as a success. If hell, half the time I don't even know what the hell they're doing. They just come back to me and they're like, "Hey, all this stuff got done. Sweet, thanks." Just so we're clear, no one got hurt though, right? Okay, cool, thanks. See you tomorrow.
once you like, and the mafia, the underground enlisted
Yes,
mafia, which never goes above staff. It stays beneath
ever.
staff ever. It stays there. And at the same time, the leaders will like once you get to that point for however long you've been in that NCO billet or in that NCO rank, you start to realize, look, you are not gonna like how I get this done.
Don't ask
But
questions.
but I'll get it done. But I'll get it done.
Yep.
You'll look good. I'll take the credit quietly. Quietly, it will be
Yes.
mine. Beyond that, just appreciate it. And the same thing. As soon as it's done, this is a good job. And meanwhile, the E6 is leaning over. Nobody got hurt, right? Like he's walking. We're fine. So yeah, it's kind of like that. You ideally leadership should get to that point where once you're done giving an assignment to someone, it should be that they should be able to handle it and
Yep.
everyone wins. I had a
Yes.
I had a first sergeant who was an admin first sergeant,
Mm-hmm.
and he came into a company of infantry marines.
Mm-hmm.
So we translated it as he's an admin first sergeant who thought he was given infantry marines. When really the rest of us are like, I don't think you realize this, but we're infantry marines and we've been given an admin first sergeant. There's a difference
Yes. Yes.
because everything that we do can make you look very good or very bad. It goes both ways.
It does.
And unfortunately, in some cases, especially for like the lower enlisted or the freshly enlisted ones, straight out of boot, straight out of SOI or MTC, or MCT, then those guys are like, well, we got to do it this way. Bro, settle. You
Sit
start
down
to
and learn
see
something.
the different levels and the different changes in leadership. Um, depending on the situation of the world.
Yeah.
So I brought that up at one of my reserve units little talks that we all got together in this drill hall, sat
Mhm.
around in circles, and we just like there were questions out there, and everybody raised their hand. No, no repercussions for whatever it is you said or asked or anything like that. And
Yeah.
one of the things is one of the questions was, what's something that like you've noticed in the change in the military over time? And there was a few things that were brought up.
Mhm.
Um, regardless of whatever's going on politically in the world right now. But no one else addressed the elephant in the room. But I looked around and I saw that there were some salty people, right? And so I raised my hand and I'm like, there is a complete difference in the generations of military.
Yeah.
Complete difference because, I mean, from the early to the late 2000s or early to mid 2000s, if you will. We're going to say early before just before the mids, I'd say. Everyone had that mentality because there was still enough struggle going on overseas and the overseas deployments that the mentality and the drive and the discipline and everything
So you're
was
talking
different,
like 2015 is like your cutoff, is what you're
pretty
saying.
much.
Okay.
Yeah, in a way. Yeah. Yeah. So around up until then, everyone was of different mentality and different material, and so was the military. That was before everything started changing. And to the same degree, as soon as I said that, you see a couple of those assault dogs with some heavy collars and a couple of patches all over here, just like that's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah. Because you
Yes.
got I could go on forever about that, but I'm not going to. But big old difference. There's vast differences in the personnel, and therefore there has to be vast differences in the leadership. Because now, along with the civilian, especially in the reserves, you got the civilian is the majority of who you are, and then you might do some military stuff. So you have to really appeal to the civilian, but also talk to the military, and that's just
I
several
think
different leaders you got to do.
I think you know, you hit a really, really big point, and it's the why. Why somebody does something is just as important as what they do. So a lot of folks who joined in the early 2000s, their why was very different than somebody who joined uh, in the mid, 20 teens or even now. Because right around the time our generation came through, it was um, 9 out of 10 folks knew they were going to war. They knew it. It was basically an inevitability. You're going to be in an armed conflict with people who want you dead. Pretty much everybody accepted that fact. Um, Fast forward to about 2015, 2016, right about the time I got out. Um, Folks coming in, you still have some remnants of like some folks who feel like they got left out, um, and those were always special cases too because you look at them and you're like, man, I could have so used you like 5 years ago. Like you've got it, and I needed that when I was doing my thing. Um, but the vast majority of the kids who are coming in, uh, either they're doing it because they're getting out of a place they don't need to be in and they know it. Uh, they're family tradition, um, the GI Bill benefits, just getting started in life. They need direction. Like there's a million reasons, but it was different than ours, uh, or at least maybe not totally different, but their understanding of the reality they were stepping into was very different.
It was
Like,
easier to
what's that?
it was easier to accept.
I mean, our reality was easy to accept. The fact that in 6 months you could be in a coffin, that was it's pretty simple.
That's what, but those parties.
uh, the why, but I think the why is different. Um, and I think that makes all the difference with regard to the type of people that we're seeing uh, come in and why there's such a huge disconnect between the older generation and the younger generation. My thoughts.
I completely understand it. And even like, I mean, hell, these days, just to chime in on what you said, like, most people these days are like joining the military. Um, Honestly, at first, right now, the recruitment rate and even the retention rate, military wide,
It's
is
abysmal.
and lousy. Yeah, downright. But I chalk that up, and this has nothing to do with the fact that I don't think people should still join the military. If anything, nowadays, I think people should, strictly on the sense that like the rate of inflation
Oh God.
is going to make life pretty difficult if you're just coming out of high school into college and don't have an idea.
Yeah.
So the military in this case can teach you a skill. It can not fully like push you out into, doing your own thing. you get like a half exposure. But while you're doing that, like I said, you get a skill and you get the financial stability of having a job for about half a decade with the financial stability of getting what you need as far as food, housing, what
Yeah.
have you. And you get the post-service financial stability of, as you pointed out, the GI Bill, the school, um, disability, what have you, you know? So it's a smart, long game plan,
Yeah.
especially in the sense if you don't have a good idea on what you're doing, why not? You
Well, I
know?
mean, how many kids going to college change their major like 50,000 times because yeah, they don't know what they want to do, but oh my God, I have to go to school because I have to do something. And I think 4 or 5 years, which is about average, right? Average enlistment term. 4 or 5 year break, is that going to separate you with regard to like, some of your mental plasticity, how your brain works? Like if you're constantly on receive mode, it's super easy to receive,
Yeah.
but once you start working, your brain does start to change because you're more in output mode now. Yeah, it does change a little bit. But the one thing that a lot of college students don't have going in is direction and discipline.
True.
Very few do. And the ones that do, you see them because I was with them in my math lab at like 11 o'clock at night and they're running through math problems, just trying to, some of them are just trying not to fail and other ones are, really striving for those superior grades, but they're the ones that have the discipline. And a lot of folks fail out or get terrible grades or make bad decisions um, because they just don't have discipline. And I think that um, joining the military, even if it's for, just one one contract, can make all the difference. And it gives you a little bit of time to figure out what it is you want to do with your life. Even if it gives you a list of shit you don't want to do, you've still got direction now.
Simultaneously teaching you something, preferably
Yeah.
something that you can use, you know? So
Yep.
it's, by all means, it's a wise avenue to approach. And
Yes.
God forbid you make some tight friendships and some good connections that you can carry for a while, you
Yep.
know? And why not? You might see some interesting things. You might go to some interesting places and have
That's
some
the best.
stories by the end. So, all that. Um, there's something else I was going to chime on with people joining up in the military. And oh yeah, the abysmal rate of retention and recruitment
Mm-hmm.
because of the 2 decades of conflict that we've had in the Middle East
Yeah.
and all the conflicts that we had prior to that. The amount of veterans that we have walking around us today and the
Tons.
different evolution of the military that they have had.
Mm-hmm.
You'll have so many people that younger generations will be like, "Hey, you're in the military. What do you think?" And most of them will be like, "Don't do it," because they'll have like a crappy experience, or they will have, I don't know, have been sent to some horrible places, or have some bad leadership. And unfortunately, a lot of times people will get out on that first enlistment because during that enlistment, they will have 4 years of the same crappy leadership.
Yeah.
And they won't see how it could potentially get better. So they will want to leave thinking that this is all there is. I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Well, one thing
So
that people forget is that there's shit everywhere. It's just different shit.
it's true. Very true.
It's um I remember my first duty station. I was like, wow, uh, this is pretty rough. Uh, I don't know if this is for me. And I was talking to one of my sergeants who had been around for a while. Um, he said, "Look, not everywhere is the same. This may not this may not be your thing, but don't count out the whole Marine Corps because of one place, because of one unit, because of one platoon. Don't do that. This may not be your jam, but give it a little bit of time, go somewhere else, do something else, and it may surprise you." So that really changed my mindset about how I looked at where I was at any given point in time. Because things can always be better, but things can always be way worse. And until you've been in the way worse, you don't know what that really looks like, feels like, tastes like.
Even then, if you're still around, it can still get worse. So
It can. But one of the awesome things is uh ironic. Some of the best stories you'll ever have came from those times where you were just finding a whole new level of miserable. Right? Takes you back a little bit. I mean, but really, and what got you through it? What made it bearable? It was the people. Because you've always got that one dude, maybe it was you, maybe it wasn't, that has enough wherewithal to crack a joke. And it may not even be that funny, but you're so miserable that that little shot of dopamine is all that you needed to like have, side splitting laughter for the next 15 minutes for like no reason. And that's all you needed. That's all it took. And everybody can't stop fucking laughing, even though you're like neck deep in peanut butter mud. You can barely breathe and you're freezing your ass off, you know? Like that's all it takes. And you're like, cool, I'm good for another 12 hours.
yeah, yep, definitely where a lot of it came from. The ability to endure definitely came from, actually, mostly came from the fact that you weren't doing it alone and everyone else was just as dead inside at that moment as you.
Yeah.
uh,
That's the point where everyone's going like fully internal and they're just kind of like turtling inside their shell. And that one dude with their last gasp before they also go internal says something just off the wall and it brings everybody right back out.
well, you remember this. One of the examples I can think of was when we did AFSAM one year, and it was the like last range of the day, and we heard that there was a storm coming in, and we look behind
Yes.
us, and we see the trees just doing this. Then all of a
Yep.
sudden, we see the wall of go to hell rain coming up, and we're just waiting to shoot. And as soon as that buzzer was about to hit, that's when we all just got soaked. There was no gentle or in between. It was just you're wet
Yes.
to the core, and we still shot. And as soon as we were done shooting, we just started laughing. We're just like, yes, because we already like that fast. We had enough practice. We immediately went in that fast inward, as you said, and yeah, we just found it hilarious. Oof.
It was one of those scenarios too where everybody got some. Like nobody got left out. Um, Targets were flying everywhere. People couldn't stand up. I mean, it was
The good news is we didn't have to scramble to try to get all the gear. We were
no,
on the line. We just stood right there and watched everyone else run around like chickens. It was great.
yeah. You just stood there, you got wet, you accepted the fact that you're going to be shooting in like I don't know 30-mile-an-hour gusts or something silly, um to the point where just trying to stand up was slightly difficult, but trying to stabilize and fire was next to impossible, and everyone knew it, and it was just funny. Like you can get pissed off about it or you can laugh at it, and that's one of the skills. I don't even know if you can call it a skill, but it's one of the things that I took from my military experiences, being able to laugh at shit you can't control. Can I
I
control
laugh.
the weather? Absolutely not. Am I in it? 100%. Well, shit. And all you can do is laugh.
When I'm in parking lot traffic, I laugh at that.
Yeah.
And most of the time it's because I'm thinking to myself, I'm not going to get hit by a high speed car.
You're probably right. Probably right.
It would
But
just be my lucky oncoming lane, just yo.
don't count it out.
Yeah, well, where I live, 95 happens.
Touche. Um,
Another another lesson that I learned after the military that I definitely could have used beforehand was or whilst I was in any regardless of the situation, it was definitely pick your battles.
oh my
Because
God.
like or as you have pointed out to me in this one saying, which I still carry, and now I got my sister saying it too, when it comes to like when she's gonna fight her kids about something, was what hill is worth dying on.
Yeah.
And yeah, because I don't know how many times people have made a big deal, as you said, about something that they can't control, or made a big deal about something that really, if you boil it down, doesn't matter that
Yeah.
much. I mean, when I first got in, I was pretty overly defensive in my youth,
Mhm.
and I was angry a lot, and I didn't know how to unleash it, and so it just reflected badly on my behavior. But I had one squad leader who was able to pull me aside, and he's like, "Hey, why don't we go to the gym and we'll do something? You ever do jujitsu?" I'm like, "No." So after like burning off a whole lot of energy and feeling some bruise and pain and stuff like that, he's like, "Hey man, I got news for you. What? How many times did I just choke you out?" And I'm like, "I lost count. I really did." And he's like,
I'm
"Okay,
so
well,
dizzy.
you are highly defensive," and he told me about like how I am.
Yeah.
And then he told me that, like, I want you to think of things this way. If it doesn't affect your breathing, like an arm or a radial nerve across your jugular, it's not a big deal. If it doesn't affect your breathing, why are you getting worked up about it?
Nice.
Yeah. For the same reason, like, after that, anytime that you go grappling with somebody or anytime you're doing something, in this case, it was grappling, he'd have something jammed up against my neck, but I could breathe just fine. Not a big deal.
Yep. Just chill.
You know, just chill. It's not that big a deal. And I see a lot of people, especially when alcohol is involved, that
Yeah.
they'll just like try to get worked up over something. I'll be like, bro, really?
It's not a big deal.
So I'd say I learned that one good too.
Yeah. The hill worth dying on. I had a lieutenant, God love him. Every fight was the fight. All of them. Sometimes sometimes I think that he would just go up to the battalion just to raise hell so that they remembered he was still there. But every fight was the fight. And at that point in my youth, if I'm the voice of reason, you have gone way too far. You remember I was highly confrontational. Like everything was a big deal. How dare you if you don't share the same viewpoint as me? Um, State your case, show your work, and I'll show you where you're wrong. Um, that's just how it was. And this guy took it to a whole other level. Like you need to dial it back. Um, but being put in more situations where there's just so much that's out of my control and learning to deal with what I can control, that was everything that I needed. Um, I actually got sent on leave one time. Yeah, I didn't even put in for it. I was sent on leave because I was literally trying to control way too much.
That's unheard of.
I'm aware.
For whoever's going to watch this later on, that never happens. You
I'm,
normally need to beg or do some kind of crap deal to get leave.
I'm aware. My gunny came to me in my office and was like, "Hey, you're going to give me some dates that you're going to go on leave. The lieutenant and I are seriously concerned about your health. We're afraid you're going to assault someone." Like, look, I am just trying to run this platoon as effectively as I can, and they're not making it easy. I went on this whole long spiel about like all the things, and ultimately he's like, "Okay, well, how much of that can you control?" It's like three things that I could control out of all the things that I listed. And getting sent on leave was exactly the thing I needed after the conversation that we had, because I got to sit there and reflect on the things I could control and then the things I couldn't. And that made me infinitely better at being a platoon sergeant and just leadership in general, hell, life in general. Because I mean, the things you can't control, like do what you can to control them, make good decisions, think about them. But the things you can't control, why let it affect you? Do they? Sometimes. But for the most part,
Only at that point should you really worry about it.
yeah. Because whatever's going to happen is going to happen. Again, it's outside your control. There's nothing you can do. And you and I put up with that stuff on deployment too. I mean, how much was outside of our control? Like most everything was outside our control. You just existed for the most part. You got like micro decisions that were your own, but that's about it. Uh, and there was a kind of a cool simplicity to it because for the most part, you had very little control over what was going on around you. Um, you just kind of accepted your reality, accepted your fate, and moved on with your day.
We got about like less than 4 minutes here.
Yeah, no, I saw it.
I won't be able to continue after we hang up on this one. So we got a little bit of time for me to just harp on one more thing.
All right, hit it.
Well, no, I thought you had one more question that we had talked about before.
No, 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 just continue on this line of thought, and we'll kick it from there. Give me
Listen,
one more lesson learned.
this one is bullshit, but never pass up a chance to eat, drink, piss, or sleep. And you and I have talked about this before, especially now in the civilian world. If we just like, we're passionate about like firearms, about shooting, going to the range, and just having a day. The amount of time that you have to do that in our daily lives now is incredibly restricted. Not only from the aspect of now you got to buy your own ammo, you got to take care of your own guns, you got to get your own range time, and that range time is finite by comparison to the amount of time that you would spend in the military.
Yeah,
But also the chances that you get to actually take care of yourself in
that's
the
the
sense
one.
that like, hey, I got to go to the bathroom. That's it. Simple, right? But also you dig deeper into it. Here you have more of a chance to sleep. You get the rest because of the rest that you yourself need. And that goes hand in hand with the fact that you realize outside the military, your body goes from being the WWE wrestling ring that it was required to be to now being the temple, in which case you can sacrifice some evil people if you need to, you know,
Yeah,
because yeah, I mean, I've told you now since I got out, I had not seen a professional doctor about my joints or my knees in this case. So now I'm going to these people and they have officially told me how jacked up my knees are. So I'm taking
we
measures to
always
try
knew
to
they were bad, but now you just have educated confirmation.
now I have confirmation that I need to get a new knee, literally.
Yeah,
They
I
they
believe
told
it.
me like, so it's that whole thing too. It's like a lesson that I learned is that you are yourself. No one at the end of the day is going to take care of you as well or as meticulously as you are or you
Yes.
can, besides possibly your loved one, or other
Mhm.
people within your tight circle.
Yep.
And even if they're outside of that circle, you're not going to want to pay attention to them because it's admitting your own mortality.
Agreed.
Yeah. But that's pretty much all I got
No,
on
that's
that.
a fantastic point, man. We're gonna have to do this again. I appreciate it. Go forth, do great things, and we'll come back and do this again, man.
You just call, I will answer.
All right, later, brother.
Take care.